r/AskReddit, what's the funniest cooking mistake you've made? A friend of mine was making veggie burgers for the first time. He was adding all of the ingredients to the food processor so he could make the mix for his patties. This included a tin of chickpeas, which he poured in. He was puzzled that the burger mix was too runny to make patties. Later someone pointed out that he was supposed to drain the tin of chickpeas before adding them to the mix. Confusing wax paper and parchment paper. Added too much oil to my brownies due to misreading the recipe. Came out really shiny and slid right out of the pan. Putting Dawn dish soap in the dishwasher. My neighbor asked for club soda. I brought her cream soda. I bought myself a recipe book once, real basic. It even had a recipe for a boiled egg, that's how basic it was. So I tried the fried rice recipe in there. It was terrible. It was only much later that I learned you're supposed to use cooked rice. I just used rice straight from the packet. Stupid book. I once managed to burn a boiled egg. Don't ask. Thought I'd be fancy and make homemade ice cream. Accidentally used salt instead of sugar. My friends now refer to it as the savory surprise. Tried to boil a pot of just water and spaghetti. Said spaghetti set on fire, whilst in water. Still don't understand it, but it says a lot about my cooking skills being able to start a fire underwater. Using orange juice as milk for cereal. I accidentally poured chocolate milk into mashed potatoes. Was seasoning a raw pork. Every time I salt one part, the salt disappear, obviously, so I kept salting the pork because I kept forgetting which part I already salt. The resulting grilled pork was so salty that we had to wash it with water before it become edible. First time cooking, I did not know that you need to oil a pan, not non-stick, when cooking omelette. Accidentally spiced with cinnamon instead of curry. In my defense, my parents' kitchen was really dark even with lights on. I was on a big juicer kick and was experimenting and juicing everything. Whilst perusing the vegetables in the store, a big root caught my attention and thought, this thing's so damn ugly, it's got to be healthy, so I juiced it. Later found it was ginger. I was so excited at my creation that I gulped down 3 good swallows before realizing I had juiced the devil's tongue itself. A tiny bit of that shit goes a long way. Fire, fire, fire. My biggest cooking mistake was potentially dangerous, not funny. But my wife once made an apple pie and mistook jerky seasoning for brown sugar. It's always going to be swapping salt for sugar. I was visiting my mother and decided to make breakfast one morning. I usually add a bit of milk/half/cream to the eggs before scrambling, but she didn't have any. She did have some coffee creamer though, and I've substituted with creamer before, no big deal. I didn't notice, but it was hazelnut creamer. Those eggs were god awful. I put 1/2c of salt in a cake when it should have been 1/2c of sugar. In all fairness though, I was about 9 years old and just starting to cook. My mom tasted the batter after everything was mixed up. The look on her face was priceless. I remember telling her we should have still baked the cake for my dad as a joke. I once made a pie, but forgot to add sugar. Oh, I once mixed up salt and sugar when I was baking cookies. Let's just say my experiment with sweet and salty wasn't a success. I once set my house on fire while trying to boil some noodles. I asked the East Timor P to clean 20 kilograms of mussels and he put them through the dishwasher. Some years ago, my apartment had one of those electric burners that gets to deceptively high temperatures. I wanted to make spaghetti, so I got some water boiling for the pasta. I walked away. Got distracted by the internet. Forgot all about it. Took a shower. Sat down and started playing video games. by the time I realized something was wrong, it's because I smelled something weird, acrid, and metallic. The aluminum saucepan I'd set on the burner had gotten so hot that it boiled off the water, overheated, and melted all over the stove. It was a mistake that ended up costing me a couple $1,000s, and the thing that finally convinced me to get my adult ad treated. Cooking a pizza at 20 degrees for 350 minutes. Head chef here, once we got the same plate of food wrong 6 times. It was the last order of a busy day. After 5 screw-ups I decided to do it myself. I proceed to show off and get it right. While I'm walking the plate to elevator I smack it against the wall by mistake. In the end we asked the kitchen porter to do it and he did it perfectly. Was frying some eggs for my husband's breakfast, and I always sprinkle turmeric over. Reached into the spice rack, grabbed the bottle that looks like the one I have turmeric in and shake it over the eggs. It was cinnamon. I had forgotten I had gotten the same bottle that I put cinnamon in. My husband still ate those eggs without complaining, even after I had told him I would make a new batch for him. I once managed to burn soup. My daughter was in a school cooking club over Zoom when everything was locked down. She somehow misread the recipe as needing 4 cups of butter instead of 4 tablespoons. We had a good laugh over that once she realized. Stumbled while putting the tray with the sheet cake in the oven. There's this Tool song Die Eier von Satan, which is basically a cookie recipe. I didn't put the flour in. It's literally the first step of the recipe. Smoke detector went off at like 2 a.m. My husband inadvertently invented curry enchiladas because he was zuzzing them, as he likes to say. Curry, cumin, they both start with AC so they must be the same. Not me but my cousin. Oh that's not sugar mom where's grandma's urn looks at cake. Cooked a ham in a slow cooker with the clear plastic wrapping on it. I was making sausage gravy and mixed up flour with confectioner sugar, they were in matching containers. I realized my mistake pretty much right away but even after removing as much as I could, the damage was done. It was inedible. Now, when I'm making biscuits and gravy, my wife almost always asks me if I'm sure it's flour. That never gets old. When I was in grade 7 home economics, we learned one day that a boy in our kitchen group couldn't read. We had a clear Tupperware box of salt and a box of sugar on our counter. They had masking tape labels written in block letters. The 2 boxes were not the same size at all. The salt box was much smaller. This kid's job was the dry ingredients. He did the mise en place for all the dry ingredients and none of us questioned his work, until it came time to eat our blueberry muffins. Salty as F###. Nobody told us that we needed to help this kid with reading. This is a restaurant thing, not a home cooked thing. And I wasn't the one making the mistake but I sure as fuck fixed it. You cannot turn on a deep fryer without oil in it. The fryer will shortly burst into flames. I know not everybody works in restaurant kitchens, but the amount of people who do and don't know this blows my fucking mind. I had to put out 2 separate fryer fires in 1 year. Once as a distracted young mom of 3 kids under 5, I breaded pork chops in powdered sugar. After doing dishes and heating up the pan I absent-mindedly used the dish soap as liquid butter. Boiling dish soap is not the best smell there is. Nutmeg instead of cumin. It was unexpected, but not bad. I mistook cream of wheat for breadcrumbs, they were in a clear container in my pantry, and fried pork chops coated in it face with tears of joy. My sister who does not cook at all tried to help us one year with our Christmas cookies. She picked an easy cookie but they just spread over the cookie sheet. She called me in tears, which is so unlike her. My mom kept the baking ingredients in unlabeled canisters. She was using confectioner's sugar instead of flour. She never tried to help us again. First attempt at a Yorkshire pudding. Ended up baking a tasteless cake. Just chucked custard on it and ate it anyway. Not straining the mac and cheese before adding the cheese. When I was young, my siblings and I used to harvest a lot of wild fruits and berries. My father and I took some frozen blueberries out of the freezer and made a blueberry pie to impress Mom. Only problem was, we took out a bag of choke cherries instead. The choke cherries were being saved to make jelly, and after freezing they looked like blueberries. The problem was that the choke cherry seeds are pits that take up almost half the cherry. We found out with the first bite. We took a bite and had to spit out the pits. Ate the pie but never made that mistake again. I made banana bread but it ended up sinking into itself. Couldn't figure out why and it kept me up all night. Went through all my ingredients and realized I used powdered sugar instead of baking powder. They were in unlabeled containers. Oops. Turning on the stove gas, accidentally letting it rise. Then going to turn on the actual flame and lighting everyone around me on fire. Not really a mistake but a funny thing that happened. Me and Mom were baking and I had an egg in my hand that I was about to crack. Mom asked me a question and I went to point and for some reason threw the egg across the kitchen. Maybe a you had to be there moment, but we still laugh about it to this day. It happened maybe like 12 years ago. Another time my mom went to get some crumbs off the top of a cheesecake, and she tipped it over and in slow motion it just fell right into the sink. We had to go to 3 different stores to find lemons for a new one. That is another story we still talk about because it was such a dumb thing to do, but in the moment she thought it was a grand idea. Thinking about this is making me miss my mom. I just texted her that when I fly into town in a few weeks we should do some baking. Not me, my kid. Not once but twice, forgot to put the water in his noodles he cooked in the microwave. First time set the microwave on fire. Second time we had learned the smell. Gotta start somewhere, hey. Made my son's birthday cake using masa instead of flour. Felt like an idiot, so I promised him to make a new one next weekend, used powdered sugar. Next year I make the birthday cake, used masa again. Was making one of those banquet microwavable pies in a toaster oven. Forgot about it and took a nap. Came back 3 hours later to a hockey puck. My sister once asked me to make her a vanilla Coke. I made her explain, and she, annoyed, said, use the vanilla in the cupboard, pour some into the glass with the soda. So I, being the dutiful sister, went to the cupboard. Opened the cupboard, looked. Saw only one thing labeled vanilla. Added maybe a teaspoon into the glass of soda. My sister's face was a magnificent symphony of realization and disgust. Turns out she meant the vanilla syrup, in the far back, a clear thing facing the wrong way behind several items that I should have known was there. Not really a cooking mistake, but I'm really embarrassed by it because I might as well be a chef and it humbled TF out of me. I was prepping a roast and cutting chunks of it off here and there to snack on. My boyfriend at the time was a butcher who also liked raw meat, so I handed him some and he goes, Have you been eating this? I was really confused because he liked raw beef as much as I did and he's the one who brought the roast home for me to make in the first place. So yeah, I was 24 years old when I learned that Boston butt is not beef. It is pork. I'd eaten probably a small steak worth of raw pork. Thankfully this was learned before I served both of our families a rare-ass pork roast. In my defense, it really do look like beef. I was cooking microwave chips, went to play my game, took them out, put in again because it said 1 minute after shaking, so I put them in again and went to play my game and came back to take them out and they were smoking, so I put them in the bin. Bin was smoking, sending alarms going off, and so I picked up the bin and took it outside. Bin was smoking outside for 1 day. Not a mistake, but when making bread pudding I had no allspice, so used Chinese 5 spice. It was fine actually, face with tears of joy. I wanted to brine some beef for my stew. I didn't really know how to though. Pretty much just covered them with regular table salt and let them sit for 30 minutes. The stew was basically inedible. I don't know if it's the funniest, but it's certainly the most recent. I'm snowed in today and decided to make soup. 2 hours later, when I tested its temperature for the 4th or 5th time, I realized it was still cold because it was on the burner behind the one I turned on. Yes, it's that kind of a day, thumbs up light skin tone. I burned the pasta water. And that's how you are reminded of evaporatio. I wanted to make gingerbread cookies and needed a new cookie sheet, and the cookie cutters. So, I placed a Target pickup order. Turns out the cookie cutters were out of stock at my selected store, so they sent that order to another one several miles over. I had to go to 2 Targets, it took forever, but finally I get home to unpack my bags and get started baking my delicious cookies. I had accidentally ordered a mini-size cookie sheet and tiny cookie cutters. It was truly a "what is this, cookies for ants?" scenario. Thanks for watching. Leave a like if you have enjoyed this video and subscribe to never miss an upload.